Good morning, Excellencies, Your Highnesses, ladies and gentlemen. An absolute pleasure to be here with you and invite you to join us for this opening session for the summit and the annual meetings of the Global Future Councils and Cybersecurity. We have an impossible task ahead of us, which is to somehow, in the next 30 minutes, go through an amazing panel to share with you their expertise and to ensure that we all have a context that is similar. We've thought through ideas across multiple disciplines, and that we take that into the next day and a half of brainstormings. So let me manage some expectations. We will probably put out a large set of questions, challenges, opportunities, but we will not, in this panel, aim to pull together solutions or draw out red threads, because the job here really is to inspire all of you to take those questions and challenges and opportunities into your conversations. My name is Saadia Zahidi. I'm a managing director at the World Economic Forum, and welcome again on behalf of the forum, and thank you so much to our hosts in the UAE for pulling us together for the 16th annual meeting of the Global Future Councils. I'm going to introduce briefly our panel, and then we'll get on with the conversation. Next to me is Robert Lee, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Dragos, USA. Next to him is Azeem Azhar, CEO of the Exponential View. Next is Sylvia Earle, creator, Mission Blue Foundation, National Geographic Society, and has spent 8,000 hours under the sea. And finally, last but not least, our host, and Omar bin Sultan Olama, Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence, Digital Economy, and Remote Work Applications of the UAE, and also a young global leader. Welcome to all of you. Let me get started with a phrase that I have heard so many people say over the course of the last day as we begun some of the conversations here. This time really is different. So I'm going to turn to all of you and ask you how you interpret that within your fields, what keeps you up at night, and what are some of the big challenges that you see. And I promise we will get to the opportunities after that. Robert, since you're sitting next to me, I'll go with you first.
Of course. Yeah, I think it's appropriate as we talk about the future, and we talk about the global futures, that we also think about the cybersecurity of it, right? So cybersecurity, and what keeps me up at night, is that we've transitioned from a world where we kind of understood where we were going to go. We kind of understood our systems. At one point in time, our electrical grids were pretty easy to understand. Our manufacturing processes easy to understand, et cetera. But now that we're pushing all the technology and the innovation and the automation and the digitization, we've really designed systems at times that we don't understand at all. And so a lot of the world around us, the physical world around us, it operates better than it ever has before. It's safer, more profitable, it's more economical, it's fantastic. But if it collapses, if it goes down, if we have those issues, not all of us actually understand why it took place or how to recover it. It's a very scary thought, actually, that as we try to build out the future for AI, for our infrastructure, for the data centers, and all that goes into it, that we're adding so much complexity into this environment, adding so much complexity into these systems, that there are bad actors out there, criminals and states, that want to take advantage of that in a way that causes societal harm. And so whether we're talking of the control systems that operate underwater vehicles, or we're talking about the control systems that operate our data centers, securing those is going to allow us to have a future. And if we don't prepare today, if we don't do the time is now discussion today, we simply will be in a very vulnerable state in the future and not be able to take advantage of it.
Thank you. Azeem, your interpretation?
Well, it really is different this time. Over a decade ago, a phrase was often uttered, which is that software is eating the world. And it was an idea that we were moving computing out of Excel spreadsheets into being able to order a taxi or schedule a logistics delivery. And in 2025, what we're discovering is that software is demanding a new world. It is demanding physical infrastructure, it is demanding power, it is putting real orders and filling up order books right across the supply chain. And we've realized that computing, which we've thought of as something immaterial, intangible, has a physical consequence to it. And that means that when you think about what a world with computing looks like, you have to start with the excavator in a mine, digging out some sort of physical resource, and months or years later it turns into that computing infrastructure. The second reason why I think this is different is that compared to previous technology waves, this is something that's being driven by customer demand, by consumers wanting to use it, by businesses wanting to use it. It's very, very distinct and different to the metaverse or to industrial blockchain, or to, for those who remember, RFID. These were technologies that were pushed by the technology industry and by vendors trying to find a use. And what we see today, and what I see certainly in the data, is that if you can't use an AI service today, it's probably because there's too much demand for it. You've been load balanced off Gemini or ChatGPT. And that customer pull is really critical, because it means that alongside of speculative money coming in the industry, real customer money is coming in the industry. And that is really what drives some kind of longevity for a wave like this. And then I think the final dimension to all of this is, because of its scale, because of its generality, because of its prevalence, a lot of this fabric has the qualities of public infrastructure. And so for many countries, this is less true in a country like the UAE, which has built its infrastructure in the last 50 years. But for many countries, particularly those in the West, they've not undertaken large-scale infrastructure build-outs for 60, 70, 80 years. And it's distinctly different this time around, the scale of infrastructure that is required and the nature of that infrastructure, whether that should be entirely privatized, whether it should be entirely state-owned, or it should have some mix in between, become really, really important questions that we haven't really had to ask in previous technology waves.
Thank you. Sylvia.
Well, first I want to say what a privilege it is to be here in a country that I first visited in 1991 when I served as the chief scientist of NOAA, the agency in the United States that, among other things, is involved with really trying to understand the nature of the ocean. When I came in here, this country was a very different place. When I arrived on the planet some years ago, the world was a very different place. If I have anything to offer to this conference to provide perspective, it is that I come as a witness that I'd love to be able to effectively share with you. I mean, astronauts go high in the sky, and they come back, and they want to tell you what this planet looks like from afar. It's a blue miracle in a universe that's not very friendly, except here. I've gone the other direction as a witness, and as a scientist, have been privileged to use submersibles to live underwater on 10 different occasions, underwater laboratories, and of course, just thousands of hours under the sea, as well as years on the surface of the ocean. I know most people do not have the privilege of going high in the sky or deep in the sea. But those of us who have had these opportunities, it's an obligation to want to share the view. This is the first time in all of our history that we could see what is now known, know what we now know, including, perhaps most importantly, the magnitude of our ignorance about this blue miracle that underpins everything we care about. I heard a wise old economist once remark that the economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment, that all human wealth, as we define wealth, comes from converting nature into whatever we wish to convert it into. Consider this country, where it was a century ago and where it is now, early in the 21st century. We're really good, getting better all the time, at converting elements of the natural world, whether it's trees or rocks, fish, whales, water, air, into our purposes that we value. What is now before us as never before. It's the best chance, maybe the last best chance we will ever have to come to grips with our use of nature, our valuing of nature. We know how to put a dollar sign or any other currency you wish to use on nature. We know that a whale has value, dead. We know that trees can be converted to board feet of lumber, or they can be removed from a place so we can put something else in their place that we consider to be more valuable than just trees. But all things considered, how much of nature we have converted to our purposes. About half of the natural world currently has been converted just to feed one species. That would be us. Half the world is the blue part that we call the high seas. And for the first time in our history, we're beginning to think of the high seas, the areas beyond where we have claimed jurisdiction, out 200 miles, the global commons that all of us rely upon for the air we breathe, for water that magically falls out of the sky, for temperature that is within range, that is suitable for life as we know it. But we are seeing for the first time our ability, one species, to change the fate not only of ourselves, but of all the rest of life on Earth, the millions of other species that make up the fabric of life, that make Earth, along with the ocean, that holds 97% of the biosphere where life on Earth occurs, currently at risk because of the one species that has the power to convert so much of the natural world, consuming nature to suit us. We're right on the edge. Biggest security question of our time. Nature could consume us. We're just one species, and we have seen others come and go throughout the history of the Earth. We have a chance, unlike dinosaurs or any other extinct species. We can choose the future we want. I think we want to be here. We have to take into account that there are limits to how far we can go in terms of converting our life support system, the elements of the Earth that keep us alive. We're pushing the edge. So I think it's great to be a 21st century human being. It's the first time we've been able to know these things. Maybe our last best chance to make sure we listen to nature and gauge our expectations of who we are and what our future can be within the limits of the environment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, as you've heard from our other speakers, the UAE is one of the few places in the world that is consistently ahead of the future. Is this time different? How is it different?
You know, the only thing I could think about when she mentioned that the first time she came here was 1991, I can't remember what I was doing back then, but I think I was learning to take my first few steps. Now, what that really meant to me and why it resonated is when we talk about the fears that I have for the future and what I think is going to happen. In 1991, if anyone came to a stage similar to this and said that a city like Dubai or a country like the UAE is going to be at the forefront of artificial intelligence, or it's going to be a place that attracts the minds that are in this room today, or that it's going to be a place that the future is seen, everyone would have thought that this is an audacious vision that might not be achieved. And what I think the fear that we have for the future is we don't have audacious visions for what we can do to solve certain problems related to the future, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's climate change, whether it's energy availability and other things. And I think the world needs visions. The world needs a positive outlook towards the future, not an ignorant outlook that does not consider the challenges. But the only way we'll be able to come up with solutions is if we are positive about what the future holds for us, rather than if we are pessimistic about what the future holds for us. I'll give you a simple example. Every single time we're talking about energy availability, people talk about the challenge, the monumental challenge of creating data centers, creating the energy grids, and creating that availability that is required. And a lot of people talk about this being an impossible task. We can see that over the last 10 to 12 years, the greatest energy infrastructure project in the world has been created. I'm not promoting it or demoting it, but it was created by individuals, then by corporations, then by governments, called the blockchain or the Bitcoin network. Now, why that is interesting is because when it first started, someone laid out a very audacious vision for the replacement of the financial system and the requirement for infrastructure. Over the last 12 years, more than 20 gigawatts of infrastructure was put in place all around the world because the incentive was clear. Now, my question is, what is the incentive for saving the climate? How can we create an audacious vision that the climate is worth saving and that each one of us has a role? And how can we create an incentive where each one of us will play a role to actually do this over the next 10 years? Do I think we can save the climate in 10 years? Absolutely. I know it's a crazy, big, bold idea, but it's absolutely possible. Are we going to be able to give every single person in the world the ability to use artificial intelligence to leapfrog their social status, to be able to contribute to the future more positively, to be able to develop their country? Absolutely. Is it audacious? Yes, it is. I think we're looking at the future, unfortunately, through the, we're driving forward, looking through the rearview mirror. And I think we need to drive forward, looking through the windshield and thinking about the best path forward to be able to save the climate, to be able to create opportunities, and to be able to shape the world. That's the ethos of the UAE. And I think that this should be the ethos of every single person in this room and beyond.
Thank you. So let's spend a little bit of time looking through that windshield. In each one of your disciplines, what are some of those emerging frontier areas that give you cause for hope and optimism, and something that you'd want everybody here to know as we go through the next day and a half? Rob?
So, looking specifically to the cybersecurity discussion, I do think that we've never been in a better place as it relates to our talent, our people, and the dialogue that we are having between countries. And there are certain topics that most of us can align on very well. As an example, when you look at cybersecurity for many, many years, the large focus of it has been enterprise information technology, your websites, the personal computers that you have, your personal devices. That's been the focus. But our world is physical, whether it's the submersible or the data center or every single piece of the infrastructure we're dealing with today, that came from operational technology environments. It came from manufacturing lines, carbon crackers and gas turbines and things like that. And we've never really invested there. We've never looked at there. We didn't need to. It wasn't digital. It wasn't connected. It is now. And so we're spending a lot of time looking there. And when you look at that problem, the reality is it can hurt our kids and it can hurt our families. There was a state actor a couple years ago in this region that performed a cyber attack on infrastructure, and it was the first time ever we saw that somebody was trying to kill people through a cyber attack. They failed. It only cost around $300 million in downtime, but the intent of the attack was to try to kill people at a facility. We see criminals breaking into water systems around the world, trying to change chemical levels. These are not actions that drive profit. These are not actions that drive an outcome for anybody that would be good. It's just bad behavior trying to hurt our families. I've got 3 kids and a 4th one on the way. I can't imagine the idea of one of them being hurt because somebody else somewhere in the world thought, I can attack this infrastructure, it's available, why not? And so when you talk about dialogue and you talk about hope, I think that's something that everybody aligns on, protecting our kids, protecting our families, protecting our shared infrastructure. There's a lot of conflict these days, geopolitical conflict between major states. And if you get most of them in the room and you have a dialogue, you'll find that all of them can align on some of those topics. And so you can't convince the United States government and China not to want to spy on each other. You can't convince states not to want to do intelligence operations or military operations. But with proper dialogue, you can make an argument that protecting families, protecting kids, protecting civilians, this is something worth doing. And we do have the knowledge to do it. We do have the capability. We don't need new technologies invented to come up with this. I want innovation. We should continue down that route. But we have the means today. A lot of time, it's just about the dialogue. It's about the execution of the needs. It's about the awareness that this is even a problem in the first place. And again, as we want to chart towards those futures, we've never been in a better place to have the talent, the capability to have the dialogue, to be able to have the current technologies, to go do something about this. And I look forward to one day talking to my kids and explaining to them that cybersecurity was a thing of the past, that we don't need it anymore, that we're just all living in a wonderful, safe world. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. But until then, it's a worthy endeavor.
Thank you. I think you struck the balance between looking towards some of the challenges, but also what might be the possibility for hope. And dialogue and thinking through next generation certainly is one. Azeem, your view, looking out, what are some of the solutions and areas of hope you see?
Well, I'm very excited to be in the passenger seat of the car being driven by His Excellency, and he's taking us on a very, very...
It's self-driving, so...
Oh, self-driving, of course it is. Well, we're both sitting in the front seat then, and we're both looking out the windscreen, and we are going somewhere that is really, really interesting. And because we have come from a place which was perhaps not so interesting, we've forgotten that we can look out the window and we can imagine. If we look at the new demands being put on the energy system by electrification of industry, by electrification of transport, by desalination, and of course by air conditioning and artificial intelligence, that is a tremendous opportunity. Because nothing can drive imagination, nothing drives incentive, nothing drives investment as much as having demand. And one of the things that I'm excited about is how this demand might be channeled into the construction of new systems, new design patterns that deliver things like energy, which is the foundational input into any human prosperity, but also things like cognition at a machine scale and machine cost, which is also foundational to delivering any type of service for us to anyone, anywhere, at any point in time. And that, I think, is a really exciting picture to paint. It's an exciting journey. Thank you for telling the car to take us there. And in amongst that come a lot of very, very creative, difficult and interesting questions of how this ought to be governed. How do we manage the resource footprint in such a way that it doesn't despoil the biosphere that supports us all? President Brenda earlier said, technology has gone from being a tool, to being the environment in which we live, which I agree as well. It's stopped being something that's out there and started to be the substrate within which we live. But it is a substrate that is encapsulated by the biosphere in which we actually really live and really do depend upon. So the journey that we're going on now is one where where we have this tremendous stimulus, demand, excitement, opportunity, but with that comes the great responsibilities for understanding how to steward the resources, how to govern this, and how to deliver it in a way that ultimately supports human flourishing and human equity.
Thank you. Sylvia, every year the World Economic Forum produces a global risks report, and for at least a decade now, the short-term risks tend to, for example, this year, focus on cybersecurity, misinformation, disinformation, societal polarization, economic risks, and 10 years out, they're almost entirely dominated by climate and environment-related risks. What are some game-changing ideas? What are some of the developments that you see happening broadly around the protection of the biosphere that you think can vastly speed up the timeline with which we're thinking about this?
Well, I think the most urgent element that we need to consider as we crunch the numbers and figure out the direction for our future should be to appreciate the magnitude of our ignorance, what we still don't know. As we feed information into the computers, and now with artificial intelligence, we must continue to remind ourselves we don't know all that we need to know to have a safe, prosperous future. We can use what we've got. We've never had more knowledge. It's our superpower. Never before could we see Earth from space. Never before could we begin to understand our place within the fabric of life that makes Earth special in the universe. We could not do that when I was a child. We just have to be cautious while we are aggressively trying to figure a way forward. I attended the World Economic Forum in 2012 and listened to Johan Rockström give a summary of what scientists at the Potsdam Institute were beginning to see about what keeps Earth within safe operating space. And there were certain categories: carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the development of how many species are there, land and sea. What compromises are we imposing on this safe operating space? And what are the limits? How far can we go and still have a planet that's working in our favor? It's like, little capsules going up in space. You have problems. How do you fix the problem so you can stay alive? That's our biggest problem right now, trying to figure out how far have we gone, are we going, can we go within safe operating boundaries. Johan Rockström at the time had a wedge in looking at these boundaries, these elements that make Earth special. And that element said, surprise. Surprise. What's going to happen that we can't anticipate because we don't yet know enough? We haven't put all the information that we need into the computers so that they can actually come up with real boundaries, if you will, real understanding. I mean, when I was a kid, the idea that you could predict the path of a storm coming in your direction was inconceivable. Now it's considered normal, but we still don't have all the answers. Nature will do what nature will do, and we get surprised all the time. So that's, I think, the message I want to convey. It's, let's embrace technology to go as deep in the ocean, as high in the sky, to understand the microbial world and the value of respecting nature. Because in the end, nature wins. We can guide ourselves, make policies, and try to live in a way that will develop a peaceful planet. But we don't make the laws of nature. We have to listen and obey those laws because we can't change them. You know, the sun rises and sets and the world turns. We are changing the nature of nature through our actions with unpredictable consequences. This is the best time ever to be a human because of what we know. But we should always keep front and center the magnitude of what we don't know.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Your Excellency, your source of hope and optimism.
I'm going to try to keep this very short because I think everyone has other things to do as well. So my source of hope and optimism, I actually saw something last night that really calmed me down a little bit. Most of the predictions predicted that most of the content that we're going to be seeing online is going to be AI generated by 2026. So some predictions said 80%, some predictions said 90%. Axios just published a report where they realized that the amount of AI-generated content online plateaued and is sitting around 52% today. Now, there are multiple factors for that, one of which is that the search engines are not showing AI-generated content as much as people would think it would, because they started to realize that people are not clicking on this AI content that's being generated and distributed over the internet. What that means is that our predictions for the doom and gloom scenario are not necessarily 100% founded. That sometimes things do work out, because whether it's incentives, whether it's how the technology moves, that the world does end up being better than where it was. What keeps me optimistic about this is that I believe that if you look at the UAE's example, a small nation with a big vision for itself and for the world can really change the world. I think with that, changing small and simple things, you can really inspire the world to do more. A funny example would be, most people ask me what Dubai stands for. Depending on what our focus is, Dubai's meaning changes. At one time, it was Dubai understands business and investment. Now, I think Dubai means defining the uncharted boundaries of artificial intelligence. And with that, you realize that every single person on this land has a similar focus on really defining what that future looks like for AI and beyond. Now, what I think really is going to be the thing that shapes the next 10 years, the next 10 years are going to be shaped completely by the people that are going to be native digitally first. I think they're going to have much more productivity than the generations that need to be trained to be online. They'll be much more informed and they'll be much more capable. And with that, I think that they will do the right thing. We heard Her Excellency Ahoud talk about that this generation has certain priorities, whether it's the climate being a priority, whether it's purpose, and so on and so forth. And then finally, there's a statement that I hold to heart. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, the Prime Minister and ruler of Dubai, published a book recently, talked about what I've learned from life. And he said something that I believe should move all of us. He said, if you don't have a vision, you will be part of someone else's vision. If you don't have a dream, you'll be part of someone else's dream. And I think that this is the right time for us to start dreaming and start to put visions for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think those were some very important takeaways for all of us to keep in mind through the next day and a half's conversations, keeping in mind future generations, thinking about demand incentives, thinking about what we don't know and keeping that front and center as well, having a dream and having a bold and audacious vision as we look not through the rear view mirror, but through the windshield. Good luck with the next few days of brainstorming, and thank you so much to Your Excellency, to Sylvia, to Azeem, and to Rob. Thank you.